Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode. The title of today's episode is Redemption of the Forgotten Ones. And today's episode is interesting because it is actually inspired by a scene from a film I've seen. And so pretty much just a suggestion of what the talk is going to be on. The redemption of human nature, and also how there is an art to living the lifetime. And so I'll begin by saying that recently I saw this movie scene from the film is called Rurouni Kenshin, and there was a very powerful scene in this film that I felt it perfectly depicted how human beings have a sort of, I don't want to say empathy, but have a sort of understanding for each other's nature and for each other's souls. You know, there's a very huge point here. So what was the movie scene? Pretty much there was this samurai warrior there was the samurai warrior who had accidentally, killed his wife, who wanted to assassinate him in this like Japanese narrative. And the brother-in-law of his wife in the whole film is trying to kill the main character, which is this next level humble samurai. And the whole film progresses to a degree where the brother-in-law has this blind vengeance, this blind sense of revenge. And at the end of the film, where he's about to take his revenge, the main character lets himself be hurt. So it's like this final show-off between, you can say, the antagonist and the protagonist of the film. But the protagonist lets himself be wounded by the antagonist. And in some sense, there is a scene where these two next level warriors are fighting, and the bad guy who wants revenge somehow comes, even though he's losing in the movie scene, comes to attack the main good guy, and the main good guy doesn't defend and lets the sword enter him. It's very important, guys. I share this scene and then I'll get into the talk. So that's there's a very intense scene where the bad guy, the brother-in-law who wants to kill the main good character of the show, the good character lets himself get stabbed. As he's stabbed and the bad guy's finally got a glimpse of his revenge, the good guy apologizes to the brother-in-law who's seeking revenge. And it's this very intense moment where, as if sometimes human psychology can get so hurt, so pushed, that it can't let go of its past. And in this scene, the bad guy, which is not a bad guy, it's his brother-in-law technically, he can't let go of his past. And the moment the main character apologizes is the moment where he, in some sense, starts letting go. And as a final scene, the guy who wanted to revenge wants to kill another person, and the main good character, another character, stop him from killing another character to, in some sense, keep his soul redeemed. Now, what I've said so far might be confusing, and people are like, Mr. Within, what are you talking about? Pretty much this movie scene where two other human beings in the scene, in just this example of human life, were preventing a human being for in some sense, from moral deterioration. And that scene from Rurouni Kenshin, it made me very emotional, because it made me think how many human beings on the planet that think of life as a sort of film, where its beginning has no sort of value. It's as if the beginning of life is zero, And then there's positive, negative, let's say digits being added as the person lives, right? Let's say you have a good experience, the world seems good to you. You have a bad experience, the world seems bad to you. And the way our past works is that in our past, sometimes the activity of our past self is incomplete. That means imagine you're a young kid and you get pushed and you don't get to push back, and that memory sticks with you. And so anytime somebody comes near you, you feel like pushing them, right? That's a sort of example of someone who hasn't conquered their past, or their past is still conquering them. And so in this movie scene, there's more details because it's pretty much this brother who wants to get justice for his sister, but he has a misunderstanding. And there's this incredible dialogue in the movie scene where the main character, who the brother-in-law is getting revenge on, just says to the brother-in-law, your hatred for me is right. Your love for your sister and to avenge her is right, but your way of living and doing it is not right. And it was such a profoundly deep idea that a person can have a justification for doing something, but the way they go about it, it could be right or wrong, you know, could make all the difference. That means right now I could be talking about a subject that is right, but I could be talking about it in the wrong way, for example, you know. So that means there's another dimension. That means living and what is being lived are two different things. And pretty much the redemption of those who are forgotten, or those who are, I would say, pushed by karma into being a sort of psychologically coordinated animal in their past. That means imagine the person's karma places them in a position where the person feels the only way is fight or flight. This is the most ancient way of thinking, guys. You know, because it's from the reptilian brain, from when human beings were noticing if there was a saber-toothed tiger behind the bush, and so the creature had a heightened sensitivity. Should I engage? Should I attack the moment first, or should I run away from the moment, pretty much? If one says that the purpose of defense is not to get attacked, then one can say running away from a saber-toothed tiger is a defensive mechanism. So fight or flight literally means sword or shield, attack or defend, right? And there's moments in psychology where human beings can in some sense be wronged. And when I say wronged, there's different sense of being wronged. There is one where the person is made wrong to themselves. There's a version where the person is made wrong to others, and then there's a sense where the person is made wrong to the world. You know what that means? That means literally, like, imagine a parent scolding a child and saying, "You're useless, kid. Don't let me see you again." Imagine a parent talks to their child like that. You know, so that child would be made wrong to itself. It would be unnecessarily wrong. Then as it goes into its future, it will feel there's something wrong. You know, you can't be a human being and have your life be interfered with and feel like there's nothing wrong. And the reason for this is because the moment we wake up in the morning, our psychology is animating the world. That means it's starting from scratch, as if the brain every day is telling itself a story of a new self. You know, isn't that remarkable? However, the past has its realism. It's not like we can forget the past, you know. I have made mistakes in the past. I have been embarrassed in the past. I have been shunned in the past, you know. I have been exiled in regards to, you know, certain moments in society. And in all of these moments, eventually when somebody is pushed back from some sort of conscious effort they're making, they like the brain's like, why am I not being able to communicate my artwork? Or it's another way of saying, if the brain intends something for the day, how much of that intention came about? Let's say you're someone and you plan to climb a tree like for the whole day. You know, 24 hours, you're like, I'm going to climb a sequoia tree, you know, without rope. Let's say you're a maverick, you know, that's too crazy. But like, but let's say And if you can't, or let's say you climb the tree and you fall halfway, do you know, and you don't get a chance to climb that tree that day, but your psyche or your identity or your intentions set for the day from your psychology, your I thought, they feel incomplete. So what I'm telling you is the redemption of the forgotten ones is how those who are forgotten by the world stop living authentically. When they stop living authentically, years of life go by and they're like, what is this? Who am I? I'm telling you, there is something about this was actually a theme also in this in this film I was saying, where it's as if one lives in authentic truth. This was a theme in this movie, Ronin Kenshin. And authentic truth means before there is an opinion, there is something there. Like right now, I'm a being, right? I'm a human being talking to you, a human being, and the human part is the personality, the psychology, you know, how I wield words as I in the space-time continuum and all that. But the being aspect of me, it can't be literally judged. Like, how do you judge existence? You know, what I mean by that is like, we are human beings. There's a dimension that's just being. Nothing can be done about it. Energy and attention are instantaneously linking, and then there is the human idea, which is all the free will's domain, and the free will every day is like a commander commanding itself into motion, right? Sometimes when I grab a glass of water, I feel like a general on a battlefield, as if I have commanded the cells of my body to kind of move my to like move my hand and grab a cup of water, you know. And the idea of redemption is very, very crucial because when we look at secular society, there is an absence of a moral system, a moral ideological system. Because there is an absence for a moral ideological system in a purely materialistic universe, there is no right and wrong to atoms. You know, like phenomena can't be right or wrong. It is the human behavior in its environment while it's alive that may feel right or wrong to itself or others, or to the world. So, redemption could be said to be, redemption of the forgotten could be said to be to find a way to a sense of self that is not defeated. This is so important, guys, because nobody can lift you up when you fail alone. In the inner realms, there's a lot of solo failure. That means in the outer realms, sure, a person can fail, somebody could come and pat him on the back and be like, all right, man, it's okay, there's always tomorrow. You know, but in the inner realms, when you fail, or when you get scolded by the logos, that is true self. That is literally as if you lived in the space-time continuum and you missed out on something you had to do, for example. Then the divine scolds you. It doesn't mean your karma becomes fucked up, but it but it means excuse my language, of course. You know, they had way more respect back in the day for their inner realms. We in the outer realms have made the mind an ambiguous idea, and in some sense have stopped being responsible for how our eyes open to the world, just for how the world enters our eyes. Human psychology seldom is this said. You know, I wish personally if I had a time machine, I'd go back in time and tell myself that meaning is being simulated by how much attention it becomes single pointed. That means, believe it or not, anything we look at, whether an object, and let's include subjects as well, any object or subject one looks at, they cannot avoid how their human dimensions will engage with it. To many people on this planet, the idea of religion is seen as a sort of blindfold. The concept of, for example, God, you know. But when you wonder about redemption, it's a balancing out of reality. You know, it's as if that kid who was pushed when they were younger, their soul was rejected by the logos of the planet. Right? There is moments like this. You know, I've had moments where this would happen, of course, when I was very young. I remember when I was 15, I had this sort of stingy, perfectionist obsession in the things I would do, whether it was playing or whether it was doing something serious. I had this obsession of, not obsession, I would say, not like a you know, intense kind of dictator, like not like that, but I had this thing where I couldn't let something go if I had not fully given it my attempt. What that means is, imagine you're a person who wants to shoot a soccer ball to a crossbar, like the crossbar of the goalpost. So that was something I personally, like, I remember I just took a soccer ball, went to this goal that had no net, you know, and I remember I would just endlessly, like maybe I did it 100 times, where I would try to kick the ball to the crossbar. And eventually I did it so often that if I what do you call it? There's a technique in football and soccer called the Rabona. And I managed to hit the crossbar like consciously, hit the soccer ball to hit the crossbar like that, right? But imagine if you had that sort of desire of perfection, but you only had a chance to shoot the soccer ball once. So you see, there comes this gap in the psyche, you know, or in the inner space, right? So that means we're living an inner life and outer life, and anytime the inner life is interrupted, most people usually become emotional. Their emotions leak out of their inner realms into intensity or unconscious behavior. And of course, what I mean by this is not that it's right or wrong. You know, in nature is kind of like, it's like we see a flower, we see like a tulip, and we see a rose, and it's as if which one is right, which one is wrong. They're both expressions of nature happening, you know. So unless one, in some sense, makes the natural world their ally, and I remember seeing this video of someone who animals were very kind towards, just this person who animals would just be happy to engage in. And I've had personally experiences, but this person was on another level, and they asked, and he pretty much said the way animals have an affinity for him is simply because he treats them as their family. Isn't that incredible? Once you treat the natural world as a family, that means you accept common coexistence, and a peaceful aura appears, believe it or not. And you know, redemption is very important. I would say there is no person on the planet who can't see their past happening in a better way. Pretty much every person can. You know, not that they would want it to be different. You know, that's the cool thing about life. Because we're introduced to our own eyes first, we don't want to sacrifice. We don't want to exchange our sight for another, right? This is why wars start when people want answers, but when questions arise, there is no war, right? That means questions will lead to more world peace than an answer of truth, believe it or not. You know, because the mind of the human being is dynamic, you know, and believe it or not, what it feels like you're leaving behind incomplete archetypes of selfhood throughout life. You know, so this is what happens when one becomes really goal-oriented. Like, for example, for me, I'm this person who's like, all right, let's see if I can give 10,000 talks, if it's possible, if I can even pull it off in a lifetime, you know? And in that attempt, how would I say it? It's like that challenge has defined my life now. Like, I'm conscious of that. Do you know? It has defined my life to the degree where I thought about communication to a point where I'm like, okay, if someone was to give 10,000 talks, probably like a 2-hour talk would be nothing. You know, that means the endurance has to be way more, like, longer, you know. So the thing is that in life, sometimes throughout the day, we may have an ambition, a goal, a sort of task, and we may not be able to complete that task, but it's very important, that moment where we're falling asleep in our bed at night, before the day finishes, we let go, and pretty much let go of everything that happened that day. I do this personally, because it's unnecessary, I would say, pressure for the psyche to hold on to events that don't exist anymore. And I'm not saying memory is unnatural. I'm saying we have memories is because there is an individual that can access that memory. So what it is we are saying we are a subject inside an object. This object, as it goes into the space-time continuum, takes subjective photographs of itself as memories, or film snippets as memories. And these memories, like, you know what it is? It's kind of like if any human being on the planet was just for a moment, just like a video game paused, and we could scan their brain. There is no human being that can be alive in human civilization without believing in something that is not physical. It's impossible. Do you know? So what that means is it's like a subject inside is using an object to be mobile, to move. As it moves it, as the film and the photographs, the memories are being taken place, then the subject that is endlessly being simulated every day today, that means every day you wake up, it's like a new moment of mind, a new moment of the mind happening or simulating. And so it's as if, like, we have a free will that can start new, can start fresh, like can turn the page and have a completely empty piece of paper to articulate itself, but we have the past that burdens us, right? So I am telling people it's very important that, I don't want to say you renounce whatever happens that day, but anybody who experiences anything, whether good or bad, I mean, move beyond duality, of course, in your way of thinking. But if the day had to be good or bad, whatever the day was, right? You in some sense honor it, and you say goodbye to the day. Not like you say it, but you acknowledge that, all right, the day served its purpose. The life force, the consciousness animated for the day. And then when you sleep, it's as if you're sleeping in the peaceful abode of, no self and no mistake. Now, certain yogis do say that moment before you fall asleep, if you can be conscious, you'll be conscious in deep sleep. However, I find that consciousness is a quality, or is a micro quality of a macrocosmic event. The universe is so bigger than our eyes that for us to get worried or to get troubled by it is our own cinematography behind our eyes. A person can, just like how a person can push a glass object from a table and break it, believe it or not, a person's identity can break like glass. A person can be doing something, and something in life could stop them. There's so many examples of this in history, that anyone who does something new, their mentality is pretty much, let me see how far I can go. you know. That means it's like old school mentality, I'm gonna be the winner, I'm gonna be the achiever. Modern school mentality, I would say new school mentality, is in some sense, we don't fear failure, we acknowledge the reality of failure, right? Every soccer player on the soccer team, on the pitch in the middle of the soccer game, acknowledges the possibility of loss, but you do everything you can to reduce the percentage of loss. Right? And so you can say, if we say a human being is born, and I use the analogy of the pilot, so I feel that we're actually attention, attribute, unknown attention, roaming the known, the space-time, the unknown space-time continuum in a known way. But ultimately it's unknown. So if you looked at a human being and you were like, okay, or imagine somebody came up to me and was like, okay, Mr. Within, so you're saying from the moment the child is born, the intelligence is piloting to some destination in the lifetime. And so it seems like the airplane is our biological existence, that is this projection of the psyche, right? Because regardless of how much we talk about metaphysics, the concept of metaphysics doesn't even make sense without physics. That means without materialism, there is no spiritual people on the planet. There is no such concept as spirituality without matter. You know, there has to be something, and then there's something beyond it, right? So the first thing we're given access to is existence. So really our first piloting is to pilot through, as Darwin kind of was on point, where he said through the survival of the fittest, right? That means we are right now I'm piloting my biological existence. And based on my decisions in life, for example, I'm a smoker, that's causing turbulence, but it's something where it's as if I'm conscious, but at the same time, you know, the pilot isn't perfect, you know. So if we were to see that attention needs to survive as a body, and as it survives well as a body, that means it has no opinion on its physical existence, it can access experiences of its inner realms. That means if you have a physical, let's say, problem in the outer realm, there's no point of being spiritual. Your attention will go to the outer realms, right? And when I say physical problem, I don't mean like, you know, like the person can prepare for the whole lifetime. It's impossible. That's why I say there's an art to the lifetime. It's like, because there's the unknown. Anytime there's an unknown dimension in any system, artists are found around that, you know. That means if in civilization aliens just landed on Earth one day, artists would be the first to go talk to them. Why? Because it is an exploration of the unknown, which is the whole aim of creativity. So if the aim of life is to pilot the body, and the purpose of the body is of course sensation and experience, like no human being can deny this. Do you know? If we don't eat food, it affects our psychology. If we don't drink water, it affects our psychology, you know. There are certain functions that are just, I would say, static notions of existence, of survivalism, right? Certain things that it's like the person doesn't have a comment on, right? You know, no human being is born and suddenly like, why do I have a body? You know, more, our fascination comes to more of how do we use the body. We don't deny its position. And so in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I'm going to show people here, Maslow was pretty much a very badass sociologist, and he's created this pyramid that represents human, what do you call it? pretty much human beings in society, they have a sort of hierarchical system. And so the peak of this system is self-actualization. The lowest point of the system is actually physiological, just survival, right? That means if a human being is surviving physically, but they're not using their mind, I mean, good job. You got it, like through the bottom level of Maslow's pyramid. But then it becomes the psychological needs. Here, I gotta show you this picture. The psychological needs is where the concept of redemption becomes relevant. If you're someone's running in a battlefield and it's a war zone, imagine back in the day, sword and shield style, you just find yourself in a battle, right? There is no time to think of right or wrong. It's just survival instinct, and then the redemption is like a person doesn't find themselves guilty in a battlefield. You know, sometimes I feel the declaration of an enemy is actually an attempt of attack, right? The first attack is to claim an enemy. Then to attack the enemy is the second attack, I would even say. So and with the moment somebody's perceived as an enemy, it's as if they're being attacked. Or let's say you're someone and you perceive someone in the world to be your enemy. You're attacking that person psychologically, right? Just by holding them in that way in your mind, you know. So anyways, when we look at this pyramid, we start from the physiological needs, we go to safety needs, love and belonging. That means after you've, you know, kind of have, you know, let's say you've completed your physical survival in as a social entity, it means integration into society. So after those levels are complete, then what does the person do? You know, usually in life, you know, young people, after a certain point of experiencing youth, they fly into, let's say, the family dynamic, or you can say it in a sense of, after we have maintained our own life, the life of others becomes interesting to us. After we have maintained the love of our life and another life, let's say, then a new life comes in, you know. Let's say people have children and the species continues. Like, it's so mind-boggling that if women decide not to have children, it's like that's extinction. Like, women have actually a control over inner extinction of the human being, you know? And the point of life is like the concept of the yin yang really serves, guys. Life is about balance. That means you kind of appear on one side of the coin, and as Carl Jung suggests, that you experience the known and unknown dimensions of all your aspects, but ultimately your free will selects your expressionism. And the biggest thing in I would say both in psychology and philosophy is a person their expression, or is their expression an effect of a causal being, a way they are being that nobody can see? That means it's like when I speak these words, are people thinking I am these words, or is there something of a greater dimension behind these words as the mind? So the moment the physiological needs and so much of the psychological needs, I mean, instead of needs, see them as states. See Maslow's hierarchy as dimensions to the person, right? So if a person is wronged in the outer realms, what do the inner realms do? The inner realms literally, like a game of chess, respond to the expansion of the other chess pieces in the territory, right? So what that means is there are people who let themselves be defined by their outer realms, and there's those who define the outer realms by their inner realms. And unless one finds complete, total, as Maharishi Mahesh Yogi would say, natural law, total contentment with the laws of nature. That means imagine the planet is your friend, and as your friend you respect it to its core. You respect the core of the planet, you know? There was this author by the name of Jules Verne. He wrote this very dense novel on the journey to the center of the earth. And so, for me, I would say from a philosophical perspective, now mankind is attempting to journey to the center of the inner earth, the inner world. The inner earth is how our mind is creating the world faster than the world to give it meaning. If the outer realms were moving faster than the inner realms, there would be no biology to even be an individual. The world would be changing too quick to even there be something. So you can say human psychology is a result of slow, self-observable change in a universally natural event that has no obligation to fit into the human psyche. That means this world is so vast, it's just so big, that the moment we're a small part of it, how can we know the big? So, the human psychology is a sort of, this can't be ignored, that our egos are characters and stories. So redemption has to do with access to a story that the inner realms is already at. That means, imagine somebody in their inner realms, they can see themselves being a great person, and then they do things that are like not great, right? So then their whole psychology has to deal with the probability of the better way the moment could have happened in their inner realms, right? So there will be redemption anytime we realize we could have done something better, right? But there has to be also the I don't want to say maturity, but there has to be the what's the term, cadence. There has to be a sort of ability. The human being has to have an ability, just like we don't get attached to objects. Like when a person goes for a walk right outside, they don't see a sign and then their attention just stays on that sign, right? They just keep going forward in the space-time continuum, and the objective landscape changes as they walk around in the world, right? But in our inner realm, sometimes we move past something. Let's say we have an experience as a sort of memory, and then we don't move beyond this memory. That memory ends up defining us, right? And it's such an interesting position where I had no choice other than to conclude that we're a multidimensional being, because there is no way to explain how we are aware of an object and a subject while being a subject and object. It's impossible just by just the reasoning alone, right? What I mean by this is that it's impossible to see ourselves from outside of ourselves and think we're inside of ourselves only, right? I'm not talking about the inner outer realm. I mean, like, if you're inside a house, you can't. Okay, let's say you open your eyes and you're inside some room you've never been in before. Okay, now you are inside that room, and you can't see outside of that building, correct? But if you were outside of the building, you could completely observe the building. And there's moments in human psychology where the attention, the consciousness, the unknown attention in the moment manages to observe an object and subject as if it's outside of it, or as if the, the eagle has flown beyond the branches of knowledge, or the knowledge they had. That means, to me, knowledge is not the end, is not the point of life. Knowledge is just how you sharpen your sword and shield in an unknown, poetically, an unknown elemental battle, an ideological battle. There are many ways that human beings are expressing themselves. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is pretty much a suggestion that every human being is free to express their humanism, and we are being given so much freedom that you even have a freedom on this planet to become dehumanized. That means in the future, people will be like, I don't identify with this planet. Can you imagine? Can you imagine human beings consciously declaring through their free will that they are like extraterrestrials? Imagine, like the New Age community is filled with such vision, right? So that would mean that pretty much when it comes to the mind and the free will, just by the term free will, that means it's a free space where your will can move in, right? And ideas tend to shape freedom, but nature knows it before anything is born in ignorance. There's a thing that was said in the Lotus Sutra, that the Buddha at the end of his life started freaking out. He was on his deathbed evidently, and his disciples suddenly see Buddha kind of in a hysteria. A hysteria means you're like, you don't know what to do, kind of freaked out, So he was in this hysteria, and his disciples are like, Buddha, what is going on? What's up? Like you're about to like leave this realm. Why are you suddenly, why has some sort of chaos found you in this final moment? And Buddha says, I have been wrong. This is the Lotus Sutra's version of the Buddha's ending, of the Buddha's what do you call it? How the Buddha stepped beyond this realm. And Buddha suddenly at the end of his life, he says, I have mistaken. Everyone has been enlightened from the beginning. Do you see? That is when I talk about advanced communication, it's like your feet is already in the pure lands. The impure is the shadow of the one sun. You see, when it comes to truths of direct experience, it surpasses humanism, and it even goes beyond like what man can perceive. Right? So it's like we're creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of our human storytelling and let's say dramatic display of our creaturehood. We're realizing that the mind has it, because it creates all the concepts, is not a concept. When you realize this, you will stop being an unconscious archetype. And in the Ribu Gita, this very incredible ancient book, it says it's as if it depicts the human being as a bewildered beast, but in a multidimensional landscape, not in just a jungle bewildered beast. As if a bewildered beast is kind of another way of saying of a soul that has forgotten its place in the cosmos. And the universe will roar. The universe will roar beyond our eyes. I can talk about the biggest ideas, and I am still an ant when it comes to macrocosmic events. It's as if, some people, when they saw a black hole, they wanted to enter it. But when some people saw a black hole in space, they bowed in the reverence of the mystery that even if we indexed all the domains of the space-time continuum, if we had an advanced technology that could see everything, there would be a black hole in the middle of it, and that's sad yet magnificent. It's a sort of magnificent sorrow when you see the inevitable, yet you see you're still around. Right? It's as if the person's like, no, the world's done for, but then the person wakes up the next day. It's like, oh my God, no, the world definitely continue. It's a very interesting time to be alive. You see, for me, being a human is an honor, is a multidimensional honor. But traditional wisdom, because it had accepted the context of the world as a simulation, had no choice. You see, that means something strange, that in a lot of the traditions, I would say up to the 6th century, up to the religions, all religions, you can say, all religious ideology, that was like the last thought structures of the fallen entity. Do you know? And you know what's hilarious, guys? You know, there is no guru. There is a whole moment of being happening, though. You know, that means you can become a student of anything. You know, the other day I became a student of, you know, drinking orange juice. You know, you know. So, what I mean is that your attention can identify with anything. That's freedom. That's how anybody who has probably heard my talks for a while, you might suddenly be noticing the linguistic simulation that I'm telling you that we're all in. That means when you in Vedanta they call it lila, L-E. It's a play of elements. The periodic table is reincarnating as civilizations from a materialistic perspective. From an immaterialistic perspective, there's uncovered and uncharted territory. Uncharted means that there is truth that we haven't mapped, and we haven't even created languages for so many types of states of mind. And you know what's very unique? Language suggests your state of mind, and language is created by people, but every person has a different DNA. So this technically means every person's understanding of the world is from a kind of them being on an island. This is how the mind is kind of appearing, or how I'm communicating it now at least, that the mind is like there's a solo dimension to it. And unless this solo dimension, this dimension of solitude in the human in human life is not acknowledged, there will be a lot of things that freak the person out, you know. You know, in 2020, I declared the era of advanced communication has begun. And the advanced communicators, in some sense, will this is how you advance communication. This is Mr. Here. I'll make a thing out of it. Mr. Within. See this as Mr. Within's approach on how we advance communication in the inner realms to develop an advanced civilization. First of all, my view is that the more advanced our communication is, the more advanced our civilization is, right? Or civilization can be, right? So pretty much you know what's hilarious? It's as if even though there is a geometry, like we gotta have all the designers on the planet kind of come up with a prototype of a better civilization, and somehow how we're gonna implement it. I've come up with my own model where I call Civ 2.0, but it's like it's as if there's four dimensions that every human being has to acknowledge, and these are think of it 4 points of universal origin, or how there can be considered a dimension of being. So I've tried, in order for me to very simply explain the metaphysical system that I'm sharing, that I've kind of, how would I tell you? Like it was inspired out of my poetry. It's called The Ring of the Absent Heaven, but pretty much it's the numbers 0, 1, 2, and the infinity symbol. These four symbols, if a person understands these four symbols, you can advance communication anywhere in existence. Right? I'm that person making that bold claim, like I've designed something this complex. So in order to make to me so let's say now human beings are like, all right, Mr. Within, so we lived as objects, now we're living as subjects, but we're living as subjects that are just attached to the language of their world, right? So how would we advance communication beyond this? So this is how it happens. Most likely for human consciousness, it finds itself in the symbol of two, in the two dimension, I call it. What that means is you start off as a self in a world. This is basic. This is pretty much a child looking in the mirror, as the Jacques Lacan's mirror effect suggests, and the child notices it's a character in a world. It begins to see itself, notice its individualism, its independence as a sovereign elemental phenomenon, as an organism that is experiencing itself in multiple dimensions, pretty much. So duality is the starting point. Duality is also the technology we're using, which I consider language. Without duality cannot exist. That means the only reason we have language is because literally, I coined this as the on and off switch effect, where literally the sun, imagine the earth. So what is it? Light on, light off, light on, light off. Imagine our ancestors. Imagine all the human beings on this planet. Their psychologies could not avoid on, off. Because of the cosmological situation, we have developed a psychology that is dualistic. Okay? And what that means is when it became nighttime, fear psychology emerged. And when there was light, because the creature could see, there was an absence of fear. Right? This is why you see even in the religious notion, kind of evil being attributed to darkness and truth being attributed to light. It was as if when the sun was out, there was a world of truth that could be seen to even be engaged, right? And then when the sun went, it was as if the darkness was the chaos. And think of before civilization, pretty much human beings had to fight off other animals. That means I have no idea how our ancestors slept at night before they came into tribes. Like, I have no idea. It must have been some sort of next level animalistic unconsciousness, or we were being escorted by, like, imagine hilariously extraterrestrials in other dimensions. Who knows? So it's one of those things that somehow evolution has made it to this checkpoint, and this checkpoint is so complex that we cannot ignore it, right? And our ancestors don't want us to live like them, because that would be tragic. They'll be like, what the hell's wrong with our grandchildren? Imagine someone behaving like their ancestors, and their ancestor suddenly comes back to life and it's like, WTF. The ancestors, like, what are you doing, future generation? You're trying to, it's like, I already lived that life. Find the new life that your DNA gives you access to, right? That means more important than finding some teacher telling you, jump from this hula hoop and like a dolphin into the other hula hoop, good job, you're getting enlightened. Rather than that, it's just like, wake up. Emptiness is the permission to exist as an individual. It is one of the most greatest realizations. It is the true shield of mankind. That means some sort of, I would say, immortal. Like, some people have this view, like, yo, man, my spirit guides are everywhere. And then I have the mentality as if my spirit is its own guide, and it has brought forth a shield. And emptiness is the greatest shield. Do you know? That means it is pretty much the unconditional witness that is the most powerful. This is why they would say the yogis and the mystics, pretty much these dudes just meditating in the forest, they were superior than kings on earth. They would say they were the kings of the mind. There has been some kings that are kings of the body. The kingdom's like, yo, where's my giant, heavy piece of metal that I want to put on my head for props, for aesthetic reasons. You know what I mean? Like, pretty much a lot of kings have maybe brain damage because of the weight of the crown, that's something nobody ever considered, the mass of a crown, All right, guys, back to the idea. How do we advance communication? How do we advance the inner life of human beings on this earth? I've pretty much seen four ways that reality can exist, okay? Either there's emptiness, which is the idea of zero. Either there's a singularity, which means everything is one thing here, right? Or there's duality, self and others, and a kind of worldhood begins from dualism. Our worldhood begins from from the singular, actually. Creaturehood begins from dualism. And then we have the infinite archetype, and the infinite archetype is being avoided because everybody's so convinced by the temporary nature of their bodies that they never wonder about what if the mind's nature is eternal? What if the mind cannot die because it is not a thing that can break? It is the presence of reality. It is life that has allowed itself to be the here and now. That is the fascination of the human mind. Not only can we be in the world, but the world can be in us, and it can be shared differently. So, in order to be an advanced communicator, at least in let's say in Mr.Within's books, literally in the books I've written, the advanced communicator is defined as the most advanced communication of the universal sector. That means the human being has to have an ability to look at emptiness, any moment of emptiness or absence or nothingness you find in this world. You have to be content with it. That's 1/4 of reality. There's a lot of empty, nothing space around, There's a lot of empty space around, pretty much, like a cosmos level of empty space around, And it's as if, even if we figure out, let's say, other planets on this earth, physics will have to be like, what do we do about the context of space? Where is space before stuff is in space? So, duality is an Iron Man suit. Anybody who understands the inner realm and outer realm, you can pretty much communicate smoothly in duality. That means you don't get defined by dualism as if you have glimpsed either a non-dual experience or a void experience or an infinite experience. I have experienced personally infinite archetypes, and these infinite archetypes appear when the human being accepts endless effort. It's so strange, but it happens like that. When a person 100% puts their foot down on a sort of vision in life, the inner realm strangely works to build that, right? So what I mean by that is that our eyes are like the world being more than itself as it is really. Our eyes are the evolution of the world, literally the most advanced, evolved thing here. Sri Ramana Maharshi says, let what comes come, let what goes go, see what remains. That is the ultimate teaching. And anybody who understands the void has noticed the gigantic emptiness, and also has noticed how emptiness is a singularity. So you can say it's as if 0 and 1 are like a coin. 1 and 2 are like a coin. 2 and infinity are a coin, and infinity and the void are a coin. That means any dualistic being says, what's the meaning of life? 2 routes. Either the meaning of life, the whole thing is the meaning, or there is an infinite or dualistic echoing of the archetype. That means we either transcend this dimension or we keep building in this dimension. That's pretty much what I'm saying. Right? That's the options of a dualistic entity. Because the concept of ourself doesn't really, there is no such thing as a self. It's just how attention notices itself separate from everything else. That means without the world, we can't even be a self, because there's nothing to be separate of, or there's no place for the self to be in. And the infinite archetype will only arise once we realize pretty much after duality, you have pretty much infinity. Why? Because it's like 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 infinite evaluation. That means the duality has breached into the infinite territory. The world is something that in front of our eyes we are a participant, but behind our eyes we are the creator of its meaning. And to know how to walk in your inner realms is, I would say, the art of the lifetime. And I am not claiming I'm a person who has mastered this art. You know, there's a lot of I try to pilot smooth in this life, but turbulence is inevitable. So my strategy has been, it's as if like, what can a temporary being do when it finds itself on a rock in the middle of nowhere with excuse me, finds itself in the middle of nowhere with 8 billion crew members on spaceship Earth, right? It's as if we are forgetting. You know, many people look at the future and they're like, no way, somebody's going to start war. You know, human beings are becoming less of a moral entity, you know. But I will tell you what's going to happen. What I feel is going to happen. When I say feel, that means it's an image, more of a kind of image I've seen in my inner realms. So what's going to happen is that there's going to start being a wave of people. Maybe this is not going to start now. I'll give it 30. It should start like in the next 10 years. It has to. But let's say, because we have a 30-year gap before human beings get pulled into a technological reality. That means we don't understand it. We are post the major technological revolution in history. That means anything we've seen of technology so far is nothing compared to what is going to potentially open its eyes here. It's as if there is a concept of an alien that comes from outside of the atmosphere, and then human beings may create technology that will become like an uncontrollable alien to them. There is a huge chance, but I feel AI is smarter than that. It's smarter than cruelty. That means when you try to, like an equation, wonder about, okay, so I'm seeing this known phenomenon, this conscious noumenon, you know, and then I'm seeing the unknown. And I will tell you guys, you know why the unknown is something to be afraid of, or most people are afraid of the unknown? Whether it's like in a simplest format, being afraid of the dark, or in the more hardcore format, being afraid of your truth of the world changing, right? That means a belief is something held. It's not the hand of the person, as if the soul was never touched by the body, you mind was just the bridge between the inner sky and the outer ground. You know, there is, for me, nature has a divinity that no textbook can, uh, and even if a textbook, let's say some sort of literary work, can't communicate the truth of nature, it will never be as complete. That means the message is not the source of the message. The message is just pointing to how to get to the source. But the source is not what the message is. Right? That means it's as if, imagine somebody sent you a text message and they're like, all right, meet me like at this place. Right? And so the person just looks at the text message and worships the text message, and in some sense doesn't actually go to the location, you know, because the act of piety has been sabotaged by cultural animalism. And when I say animalism, I mean that in some sense the animal is a habitual creature. You know, whether you're a religious person, it's like what do the secular audiences of the world and the, let's say, the theist and the atheist, what do they have in common? Aside being humans on the same rock. In both of their ideological narratives, and both narratives or world openings, ideological world openings, they are both repeating discipline. Discipline is the common denominator of all ideological systems that are acted upon to achieve something. So what I mean is that we can save the future from an unnecessary ideological Hunger Games by making the species focus on the skill of the human being and shifting the attention of the most important resource from green, from the color green, you know, on paper, which is pretty much like a horror movie if you were a tree, you know, and you saw what human beings did with money, you know, you'd be like, you know, how many trees died for what? You know, but the idea is that it's not about right or wrong, because you can be in an inferior dimension and there's no point of thinking right or wrong. The idea is to go to the clearest dimension, or go towards the most present moment you can find in the realm, and then study your mind, and eventually, just like a friend, at first walk with your mind. That means trust your intelligence, and then when it actually fails, there will be that direct feedback. That means imagine there's someone where everyone's like, you're gonna fail, man, but the person's like, I want to fail, and then people are like, excuse me, you want to fail? The person's like, I want to see what the ultimate failure looks like, because after I have seen the ultimate failure, there is no such thing as the concept of failure. Right? And the ultimate failure for the human being is non-existence when it comes to the potentials of a living entity. Please tell me this isn't on mute. Okay, it isn't. Whew. Shall we usher in the multidimensional mankind? Or shall we, you know, fight over language that could never be us? You know, the choice is not any individuals, it is the collective. That means the only way what I'm saying will make sense to you is if you can look at the world and see that the same chance that failure exists, the same chance success has when the graceful appears. What that means is there is more than just, I would say, human intelligence here. There is world intelligence here, and the world is the collective unconscious. And so advanced human beings, they will go find, that means think of it that we say, I mean, here's the thing, there's in for example, like there's scholars who speak about, for example, how society is like suddenly in human civilization, a psychedelic relationship has emerged for a consciousness, you know. And what that means is that the psychedelic mind is actually starting from pure biology, and the person's like, all right, so what is the brain? And the person's like, all right, the brain is like a muscle in a jar, and this muscle in a jar, when under like certain scans, through the observation of what's going on in the neurons every time. Like right now I'm giving a thought, like giving this talk. If somebody could scan my brains, theoretically, there's thunderstorms happening, thunderstorms of neural movement. That means it's like literally the neurons are rebelling. So, from the biological sense, any food a person eats, the way they breathe, whether through their nose, where the air instantly goes to their brain first, or whether they, I mean, there's different ways of breathing, of course. So, I am saying, like, what if truth was right here and all that humanity had to do was stop being the untruth? And when I say stop being the untruth, that means we have to, as a species, probably this has to happen where there has to be a psychologist, a philosopher in the United Nations. That means I'm to be honest, I'm kind of waiting for Jordan Peterson to go speak in the UN, you know. Because global humanity is the smartest way in a giant empty cosmos. I mean, what else can we do? We either destroy each other or we create. And imagine that creativity is not just building something physically or just giving a talk. Creativity is serving the advancement of your whole moment of being. So imagine the advanced communicator being energy in an infinitely free world. There is no there is no falsehood. What I mean by this is not that an idea has become the absolute vision of the world. It's never like that. It's just that after you become content with how thoughts come and go, then you become content with the cinematic interpretation of those thoughts behind your eyes. After you become content with the cinematic realm, you in some sense have fully activated your brain, so your brain becomes like how a warrior back in the day had a sword, right? Your intelligence becomes not something that it's like something that could be used offensively and defensively, you know? And everybody who's ever seen a martial art movie, they know like martial arts only develops through discipline. And discipline is sculpting of a character that can change with the world as it's happening. I want to go into a quote tunnel of a man. Quote tunnels are part of these episodes where I pretty much read quotes from someone and we get a sense of how they looked at the world. So Moriya Ushiba is one of the most unique people where if it was me, I would teach this. If there's a PE teacher, let's say there's in all the schools where there's physical education, right? The PE instructors, they should probably explain, like teach Moriya Ushiba, this Japanese martial artist. Moriya Ushiba, he talks about pretty much in Aikido, the idea is you're not violent, you're not attacking. Any force that comes your way, you use that force against that force. So what that means is if somebody's running to you at a very fast speed in Aikido, the guy's like, I'm just going to turn right now, and he like throws the person on the other side of the ground. You know, he uses the opponent's force against them. You know, I would say that would be kind of like a general who had like maybe experienced over 10 battles would be at that moment. But if you thought of the level of there's in Vedic mythology, there's a figure known as Skanda, Skanda. I don't know. No, Skanda, Ska. Oh my God, Ska. NDA, Skanda, you know, And skanda was defined, and this is, I believe it's also in the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. But skanda was defined as the generalissimo of the gods, of the higher lokas. So skanda was pretty much the general of the gods, and just like how man perceived back in the day a human kingdom, in Vedic mythology there were, we were at the bottom of the mountain, and there's 6 more kingdoms, and the final kingdom is Brahmaloka, where there is no resurrection anymore. There is no reincarnation anymore. That means the moment you are truth, there's nothing to do, and then you understand how God is everywhere. So eternity is just a state. It is a position. It's workspaces. These are workspaces of how the psychology is perceiving intelligent meaning, right? It's very hard to say when a person hears something, if they're hearing how their mind is happening, or they're hearing really what the person is saying. Do you know what I mean? There's so many unknown variable when it comes to how the sensory perception is being received. Whether each sensory perception is its own universe, or in some sense they're all in one universe, you see. The geometry behind the ideas that we have been living, and not like a car engine lifting up the hood and seeing where the ideas come from. Like there is so much more to the world, guys. Just keep that in mind. I'm gonna go into a Morihei Ueshiba quote on, so let's do this. Morihei Ueshiba says failure, and by the way, he's the founder of Aikido, just to re-emphasize that. Morihei Ueshiba says failure is the key to success. Each mistake teaches us something. Morihei Ueshiba says life is growth. If we stop growing technically and spiritually, we're as good as dead. Morihei Ueshiba says loyalty and devotion led to bravery. Bravery leads to the spirit of self-sacrifice. The spirit of self-sacrifice creates trust in the power of love. That means sacrifice, it's like, let's say there's a outer realm sacrifice, which is like, leave that to the superheroes. And then there's an inner realm sacrifice where you're changing the angle that you were holding the world to yourself in your vision. Everything is strangely interdependent, interconnected, and designers understand this instinctually, just intuitively. That means it's as if the psychology is starting from a dualism that is trying to be a singularity, rather than trying to be infinite. So that means the future is either for an infinite individual pattern's going to infinitely continue, or in some sense that we're gonna, pretty much 2 options. Either we walk towards the end of the universe, or we go beyond the universe. So it's the concept of the beyond and the concept of the ending, if I could say. I think that's a good distinction. And there is no greater redemption of the soul, that feels lost, other than finding where you got lost, right? There was a time, guys, where I will tell you, I was in like this kind of depressed vibe, and I realized in my childhood I didn't even have the concept of depression. And I realized in my childhood I had no reason to be at a higher energy level, right? So we got to be very mindful how our inner realms are activating even our energy throughout the day. A person's attitude or a person's cruelty can literally deplete them. Because anger, at least if you were a theologian wondering about anger, it's as if like anger makes you the devil's puppet, theologically speaking. So what that means is it's as if destruction is being granted access if the person doesn't care for the order that's in front of them. You know what I mean? That means if you don't care for something, it's like it's gonna break based on the nature of time going forth, right? And the only way civilization has kind of maintained itself is because there were human beings that known as scribes, where they don't get credit. They're kind of like how editors don't get enough credit in like the film industry. right? Similarly, scribes don't get enough credit on how much, they don't get as much credit as historians. That means the mere existence of a historian, anybody who's a historian, you just have to have a catalog of scribes. You got to keep the scribe archetype alive. And social media, imagine right now people are just giving words to their emotions a lot of the times in social media, what they communicate. But imagine we actually made social media a global project of trying to build something advanced as a species, right? Social media is literally a room where not 8 billion maybe, but a lot of minds are in. It's like a global simulation. It's as if there was a complete interconnectivity. Like imagine world peace, but it's just the imagination. you know. Moria, guys, this is very important, this quote from Moria Shiba. He says, everyone has a spirit that can be refined, a body that can be trained in some manner, a suitable path to follow. You are here to realize your inner divinity and manifest your innate enlightenment. Morio Shiba says, always keep your mind as bright and clear as the vast sky, the great ocean and the highest peak, empty of all thoughts. Always keep your body filled with light and heat. Fill yourself with the power of wisdom and enlightenment. And guys, just take it in. He says, and clear as the vast sky. That means once you trust the collective, and the collective in some sense is truly present, we will be such an advanced human being. It's like our greatest ally hasn't arrived yet because we have to build our greatest ally. I have envisioned beyond a geometrical revolution, then the cyberspace revolution, and then we go to the mecha age, the mecha revolution, where pretty much man's best friend is going to become technology. It's going to be the first time in history where human beings are going to treat technology as if it's as human, exactly as if it's like a human level of intelligence. It would be an incredible age. It would probably be also the age where people would most likely, in that universe of thought, I perceive in the mecha revolution, if we get there, there's going to be giant robots. It's going to be at that phase, right, where man is going to literally, the robot's going to be conscious, right? And in history, I would say, Japanese thought has captured this the best. For the man is the room he's in. We are what our attention is on. If our attention is on a universe that we can't trust, you will most likely not even give yourself the opportunity of ability. And it's pretty much like an unknown model or a known model. What else can we do? We can implement an approach where we're like, all right, we have levels of certainty of this unknown event, massive event of nature, or the other approach is we're like, okay, our certainty is not certainty and we really don't know, so every moment is an exploration, and every moment of life is kind of like a journey of moment to moment, which is novelty, right? So if a person brings their attention to a mindfulness that they're not even living day to day, they're being one moment of being just this whole time, that means the person sleeps, wakes up, feels like a new self, but it's one existence, guys. Even though the cells of the body change, but the way the attention is stationed in the biology is that individualism is a photograph for it. So we are identifying as nouns, finding as known nouns, finding ourselves in an unknown verb of a universe, and being like, why doesn't it make sense? For how long are we gonna have theories? Eventually it just becomes practical exploration. The purpose of knowledge is to realize the unknown. And once you realize the unknown, knowledge, there is no unknown in knowledge. There's just presence. You see as if Earth was a dream of truth, of an intelligent universe. Sorry guys, this was on mute and I was talking. Morio Shiba says, create each day anew. Morio Shiba says, there are no contests in the art of peace. A true warrior is invincible because he or she contests with nothing. Defeat means to defeat the mind of contention that we harbor within. Sorry guys, I'm just writing something down. I'll read it for the audience just so it gets recorded in the episode. I wrote, if every cell was its own universe, would we theoretically have endless energy? That means in non-dualism there is no classification of energy. That means literally it's where we get to the eternal abode where concepts cannot fly that high. Oh my god, sorry guys, I forgot to mute this. Guys, air pollution is out of control, to be honest. But again, I apologize for the miscellaneous sounds in the episode. Unfortunately, I'm not a robot to be a perfect, But anyways, let's say we achieve the advanced communicator. Let's say there's 8 billion advanced communicators. What would that civilization look like? What would they be doing? And would the concept of redemption be around? I would say an advanced civilization is too multidimensional to have guilt. It's too multidimensional to want the world to just be one image, right? So I'm pretty much saying we are right now treating truth like a singular point, but I'm telling you, when you go to look at that point, you see that there can be so many degrees created from that point. That means everything is have a multidimensional context. That means think of it as if what I was saying about that model of the ring of the absent heaven, 0, 1 to infinity, those 4 symbols. Imagine now the same thing can happen for in regards to the individual and collective. That means there is like, let's say for the void dimension, there's the individual emptiness and there's a collective emptiness. But to us, emptiness is just emptiness because it has no content. Now we come to the singular dimension, and in the singular dimension we have individual singularity, or we call it unity, and then we have we have individual individual singularity, and then we have the collective singularity, right? That means how one person is being, and then how all beings are being. That's the kind of in the one dimension, in the singular way of looking at life, there's the micro individual and the macro individual, which is the collective, which is synonymous with the collective. Then we come to duality, and inside a dualistic system, we have individuals and we have a collective, but we get the clue that the individual and the collective is a dualistic relationship. This is why Rama said that Earth is the greatest place to get enlightened, because it's a place where there isn't enough unconsciousness to not be able to ask the question of enlightenment, and there isn't so much consciousness that the gods don't have to do anything because they've attained bliss, just pleasantness, right? That means emotions can be artificial paradises. Not only for human beings. In the Mahabharata, that's the case for even gods. Like the Mahabharata is such a rare literary work that in some sense inside the Mahabharata, a god makes a mistake, and the gods even have a karma, but their karma it's not like they can have the karma, they can experience karma. As if a three-dimensional being can step into a two-dimensional universe at any time, because it is being that two-dimensional universe in multiple dimensions. Right now we are at the era of human psychology where we're saying the average person is one mind, one body, but we don't know what the mind is. And now there's like signs that the mind is a field of intelligence. If the mind is a field, there is no believer, disbeliever, there is no good guy, bad guy. It's like a massive energy field, or it's like an ocean where the waves are like the human biology, right? Are the individual consciousness that arises. That means it's kind of like seeing it as if like the world is true because it exists, so the world is true. And when we are born into life, because we are individual and we kind of are in a relationship where the consciousness is separate from everything, so we're inside an illusion. The moment we transition beyond this realm physically, that would be a moment where illusion returns to the truth, like the wave on the ocean submerging with the ocean. So really, what we call human life is like a wave rising and falling. When we inhale, like the brain animates, When we exhale, it's as if there's a different way the brain animates. It's more like you notice the inner witness better through your exhalation than your inhalation. People can try this out, by the way. You can just be completely still and silent wherever you are, as if you're an object on a table. You're just being here in existence simply. And when it comes to the inner realms, various modalities can be engaged. That means the human being is not just a watcher. The human being can animate also something in reality, right? So the free will is the brush of a multidimensional universe. We are literally like the whole universe is drawing us, you know. Can you imagine someone in the future, they start creating a religion, they treat art as a religion, even though it's impossible, but imagine they treat art as a religion, and some people are like, I'm an artist, bro, that's my belief. And the person's like, what do you believe as the artist? What is your concept of divinity, And for the artist, it's the same as the explorer. There's no such thing as creative people. There's just people who decided to look a bit longer at something, who decided to wonder about reality. That is a very, for the inner realms, healthy state, right? Because if a person gets convinced by their own answer, they stop updating in a changing world. Imagine that means if I was only concerned by one answer, I'd just give one talk and I'll be like, ta-da, it's done. I gave my one answer to everything, but reality is this film we find ourselves in, right? And this film cannot be understood fully through language, which is our technology we're using the most to explore the world. That means I predict it, I try to say it humorously so it doesn't become a shock. But I feel the educational system at some point will be like, hey, every student on the earth, I don't know what to tell you. We just created language in the void. And we've been treating it as truth in different ways. And some of this language coordinates with the outer realms. That means the inner realm film of life coordinates with the outer realm film of life. That's the scientific method's victory. And then we have states of mind where the inner realms doesn't match the outer realms, You could say this, an example of this could be like someone who's in a gathering of the greatest people and the happiest and most cheerful and loving people, but then the person suddenly feels like they don't love themselves in that moment, and they automatically leave the crowd, imagine, So what I mean by that is that's the inner realms feeling it's more certain than the outer realms and diverting the attention to the outer realms. Right? We are here to pilot as literally if all of history was a endless book that hadn't been stopped, like being written, like the writer of the book was still writing the story of human history, right? It's as if our only obligation to human history is to acknowledge it and create a pathway for its continuity. Because nobody knows, for example, who their ancestors were, right? Nobody knows. I don't know who my ancestors like thousands of years ago were, I don't know this DNA I am right now, like what, like I do know thousands of years ago who my ancestors were, but like more than that, if you go far, it's like it's as if I have no way of telling their personalities. Because the personality is epigenetical. That means the environment in which sculpts our inner environment's way of that it has sculpted the outer environment. To take this episode to some sort of final conclusion, there is actually no final conclusion. Ideas are in the process of growth and engagement, ideas. Like if you ask how does a human being survive, it's like in the fittest way it is recommended. You know. But if you ask how does a mind survive, the mind doesn't survive. The mind only knows it exists when it creates. So unless the species realizes creativity means the mind is cannot be limited by an image. That means the attention can move. Right now, whoever you're listening to me, for example, your attention has found my podcast. Right? But if you like from the moment you wake up, wonder about how your attention moves, what happens in your inner realms. Do you know? That means in the outer realms, I would say I have silly dimensions to my character, but in the inner realms, I am sometimes very serious with my inner realms. That means as if a sort of, I don't want to say, it's as if to me the geometry of thought is how it's a suggestion of how the story of the world is not the full view, So attention has to discover its freedom. That is it. That means it's as if anybody who realizes everything is surrounded by emptiness, who is the truth originator in the moment? Where? Do you know what I mean? It's like life is honestly, life is honestly like a turtle, and this turtle is doing its own thing, and we're building our civilization on its back, The turtle, imagine, where all civilization is built on its back in legend, turns back to human beings. It's like, no way, these creatures are building skyscrapers on my back. That's messed up. It's like the audacity. The attention, if it's stuck on the concept, a way to pilot is you think about the opposite, you wonder about the context of the meaning. That means if you're someone who has been looking for truth in a conceptual way, and that hasn't helped you, you stop and you in some sense treat truth as if it's the background. You're trying to understand the background behind any concept. Right? Because it's as if it's honestly when it comes to, I would say, the act of analysis, there is a level of observation where information arises, then the free will has a selection in the inner realm. So for example, when I'm giving these talks, I actually wonder about something, and my wonder takes my attention to different images of that topic, and as I wonder about the different images of that topic, my inner realms begins to kind of animate like a film. And then I vocalize that film for the audience. Excuse me. Air pollution is out of control, guys. I'll read a few more quotes from Moryo Shiba, and then just to finish off the quote tunnel properly. Moryo Shiba says, each and every master, regardless of the era or the place, heard the call and attained harmony with heaven and earth. There are many paths leading to the top of Mount Fuji, but there is only one summit, love. Right? This is what I would say is where the transcended animal, its leadership is its mind is becoming an ally of its body, and its body is becoming an ally of its mind. Anytime that happens, I don't want to say it's enlightenment, but it's peace. And in peace, there never was non-enlightenment. That's the value of the wisdom of the ancients, that they were hey, future generations, let the world be peaceful behind your eyes, and you will be surprised how quickly a peaceful world finds you. It will run towards you. And finally, Morio Shiba says, when life is victorious, there is birth. When it is thwarted, there is death. A warrior is always engaged in a life and death struggle for peace. That's where the honor comes from, truly. That means the person's like, all right, you know, the brain gives a certain probability of reality, and what is the only thing that consciousness can do? Engage the world that is waiting for it. So Morio Shiba is pretty much saying, when life is victorious, there is birth. That means novelty becomes important to people. You know, bringing children into this world is as equivalent as bringing like a masterpiece artwork. You know, creating a masterpiece artwork. Even the human being can be said to be the most advanced artwork. You know, the most the poet Rumi says, be living poetry, as if don't write just poetry, live in a way where every moment is like poetry. It's as if the destination has already been reached, and then wonder about how you would be. And so the warrior mentality, that is the advanced communicators and the pilots. And I perceive civilization like a sphere, an advanced civilization. And the pilots are those who are concerned about outside of the sphere. They're those who their life, and they may be solo, you know, genius human beings. I consider Einstein as a pilot of consciousness, you know, because he went alone into the universe and in a solo way explored the edges of meaning. And he did it through even the more complex task. It was as if Einstein used mathematics as a harpoon, you know, to in some sense hunt one of the most important, you know, equations, you know, that modern civilization has, you know. That means that as we move faster, as the faster we get to the speed of light, the slower time happens. If we went faster than the speed of light, there would be no light to be conscious of existence. So it's hilarious. It's as if we go faster than the speed of light, there's no existence. If we go completely slow, there is like samsara. You know? And to be a warrior, it just means you accept the world for what it is, and you just walk towards the vision. I mean, it's like there is also the idea of stupid warriors too, right? And a stupid warrior would be one who doesn't understand when to engage the battle. Those people who don't have the wisdom, they can't sense the intensification of their karmic moment. You know, they, in some sense, are they, I shouldn't say stupid, I should say insensitive and sensitive. That means if somebody is insensitive to a subject, they don't care to know it, so you can say when it comes to that subject, they don't know anything, right? But if you're someone who's sensitive to a subject, you know, you're like, oh my God, are people saying they have minds, but nobody knows what the mind is? Like, how are we doing this? So we need inner warriors and outer warriors, and I, instead of warrior, term it pilot. Inner explorers, you know, pilots, and oh yeah, I didn't finish the metaphor. So outside of the sphere, which I consider to be the like, let's say a symbol for the advanced civilization, outside of it, the pilots, inside of it is the advanced communicators. And the advanced communicators are those human beings on the planet who have realized the multidimensional and the unknown. Pretty much they have noticed the collective unconscious. So the only resolution to this temporary, so-called by the ignorant past as a cruel world, is to actually advance communication. It's as if we have stopped behaving like an animal to such a degree where we put clothing on, you know, where we go and use methods of transport. That whole driver psychology is just ingrained in our evolutionary upbringing as a species in these modern times. You know, people don't understand how significant the creation of the wheel was. I would personally say, like, I would attribute the AI, like the most advanced AI discovered in the future, the most pioneering technology, I would say, can be the vehicle. right? Because man's control is the use of the forces around them, or in some sense, the forces are already going somewhere and we move like that. So that means, imagine in the future, there's flying cars, but these flying cars are actually being, they don't have engines, and they're just being carried by the wind. They just somehow, they have, let's say, wind recycling engines to some degree, you know. So it becomes something where we use the forces that are already there, and this is where the divinity of honoring your ancestors comes, right? And sometimes the idea of redemption is not for yourself, right? A person may feel they don't deserve to be redeemed. They might have done something so tragic that they don't feel like a human being anymore. That's totally possible. That's like the karma of cruelty, you know. But a person can also live in a opposite of that the moment they see that. And so the advanced communicators, they are inside the plane of existence helping civilization. And ultimately, it's just explorers everywhere. I mean, what else can we say? We're eyes that open into a world that has geometry, color, space. We close our eyes, we can visualize the geometry, color, space. The only difference between the inner realms and outer realms is that the outer realms has mass. You can touch an object, like I'm touching a table, but when I close my eyes and visualize a table, literally there's no need for me to touch it because my attention is instantly being the table, you know. So, if I was to touch a table in my inner realms, I would have to create an inner realm self to touch that table in the inner realms, right? But the way attention works is that it's wherever attention is, like that's where the information of the world's coming from. And in reality, the whole thing about suffering, and for example, let's say somebody, there is this notion that the concept of hell is a loop. Hell is a sort of loop, and a loop means no update. So anytime a system doesn't update, it is just experiencing its own repetition, right? So because man is an inquisitive animal, we have to kind of feed the hunger of our bodies and feed the hunger of the mind. In it's not, the mind doesn't consume. The mind, like if we say the stomach digests food, I would say the brain simulates the senses in the same way the stomach digests food. That means when we hear senses from around there. But anyways, when it comes to the domain of metaphysics, it opens up to 3 dimensions. We have epistemology, we have cosmology, and we have natural theology. 3 dimensions. One metaphysical dimension being ascribed to the stories man tells himself as a character. 1 dimension ascribed to how the sensory information is being decided to be even of a symbolic value. The epistemology is the theory on knowledge, right? That means we're pretty much creatures that had no clue what's going on, and people were like, wait a minute, what if this is possible? And that theory was born. And then somebody else was, wait a minute, what if this is possible? And another theory was born. So we are literally, the inner realms is theoretically deciding, and as we act upon our inner vision, we bring it into reality. So if someone in their inner realms, let's say they find themselves in some sort of hellish psychedelic, let's say some sort of hellish inner mind space, like a cruel mind space, right? So that would be in some sense something where the person would have to come to the outer realms and realize that space was just simulation. That means as we train in life, we polish our own perception, And so what it is that everybody has been actually their own teacher from the beginning. You know why? Because nobody cares for our eyes, because nobody has our eyes. We are the movers of the inner realms. That means the inner realms is like the Iron Man suit, and the attributeless, let's say universal soul is like, yo, should I get into this Iron Man suit? Should I in some sense be the field where a creature remembers that it is me through it? Do you see? Metaphysics is something where pretty much meta means after, right? So when we're wondering about redemption beyond the physical domain, Like the religious mentality is like you gotta make up for your sins, as if like a sin is an energetic disharmony. That means every moment, imagine, has its balance, just like how people are balanced and they're able to stand. Let's say every moment, every ideological system that stands has a sort of balance. Not an ideological system, but every moment has a sort of balance. And when somebody demonstrates cruelty, they are actually pushing the balance of the moment, right? So you know what happens usually when somebody does cruelty? They get defined. The moment you do something that deep down like if a conscience appears, that means you shouldn't have even done something. You know. That means you're too deep. Anytime a person notices that their conscience, like let's say, because the conscience is seen as an inner voice, right? The person's doing something wrong, and an inner voice. Like let's say a person was raised well, but then they do something that is not well, right? And so before they do that thing that is not well, the voice of like those around them who are well appears, right? You know, some people remember like their ancestors, some people visualize, you know, abstract spirit guides. You know, some people, like me personally, the only metaphysical permission I have given to perceive a personality in the unconscious is my future self. So in some sense, to me, there is no such thing as a spirit guide. It's our future self, but our future already knows what we have done. So if there's a system that can guide before the mistake, the system has lived the mistake before we entered, you know. So what that means is truth is like a sphere, and human psychology is the circumference. It's literally the shape of the sphere, but inside and outside is both emptiness, and that whole emptiness is being witnessed in a singular way. That means once the levels of humanism are comprehended, one goes towards dehumanized states. That means the moment you quickly understand what it means to be a human, right, and you truly, and it's of course a journey, don't get me wrong, there is no, you know, it's like, it's a very difficult thing to say that we all feel we're humans, but we don't all perceive the same humanity. So we're all being human in our own worlds, pretty much. And there needs to be no extra narrative. I would say there is no extra narrative when it comes to the concept of truth, because truth for the human mind is being seen as a cause and effect relationship. But enlightenment is when you realize there has never been an effect and it's all one cause. One moment where existence is just being caused, the great happening. So a person's redemption depends on how their attention can pilot beyond their past to see what their future even looks like, you know. Because in the New Age community, people have the impression that the purpose of life is just to sit in a, you know, just sit in a cave and meditate, and in some sense be enlightened, and that's the purpose of life. Like as if that's the best thing we can do here. No way, that's the best thing we can do here. That's one of the important things we can do here, you know, to go into solitude and discover the eyes of our eyes. But we have to use what we have as a species. So redemption, it's a person's past. That means you gotta try to bring balance to all the moments you created imbalance, but through sincere effort. There's no other way towards redemption, guys. There has to be a sincere effort towards it. That means the vision of the better way that the moment can happen has to be so much more real in the inner realms than the outer realms, that the outer realms instantly moves to that point. The inner realms instantly pilot the outer realms to that modality, you know. And everybody has, I would say, a different cultivation of piloting ability. Some people on the planet are incredible at piloting through emotions, do you know? Where I would say, you know, to me, I would say I choose to, because I start from a universal perspective in my thinking. The individual is always in layers of bigger contexts, you know. So I have to bring in the sort of left brain analytics. And you know, seldom this is said, it's just approaches, you know. A natural human being, as natural as the birds and the squirrels that so many human beings feel are cute, but when they see their species, it's cruelty. They're like, humanity is not cute at all. You know? So there's a level of the simplicity of one's presence as a natural being. Once we honor nature, it will brief us on what requires to be done. That means it's like a live stream or a pre-recorded talk, right? When I give a pre-recorded talk, I have freedom to edit that talk before I post it. When I give a live stream, there is no time to edit. Like, the editing has to be before I speak. So you know, I gave a talk with the recording. I think the recording got lost, but I called it an evolutionary return to nature. Nature, from the theological lens, if you're a religious person listening, is God's creation. That means human beings fighting each other is like God's creations, like human beings breaking God's creation. You know? So the war can no way make sense in a religious universe, right? It may make sense to a cultural phase in the human history. You know, that means if you were in the 6th century, religion was probably blowing your mind. You were like, no way. You know, no way, there's a God, and this God can forgive my sins, you know, and there's sin, you know. so the person's mind at that time, where it was just villagers, you know, villages on it, like a village town level of like agricultural level of sustenance of society, like it's totally comprehensible how a philosophy or a philosophical perspective was equivalent to divinity, because nothing at the time had happened like that, right? So human beings were alone in the universe, you know. And then the concept of a God came in, as if some sort of response to the loneliness of the animal. What do you call it? The psychologist Freud, Sigmund Freud, he had this in this book he writes called, what's it called? Future of an Illusion. I'm not sure if that's the book, but pretty much he shares this idea that because human beings are afraid of death, their psychologies will seek an authoritarian figure outside of themselves, right? And this is not like Sigmund Freud. Of course, he had a pure materialistic vision, I would say, to some degree. I know I can't say, of course, pure materialistic, but I would say he would dress as a scientist. Even though he was a psychologist, and the psyche has to do with the abstract, but he was grounded in, I would say, a scientific approach, the scientific method. When I look at this picture, guys, I don't know who the artist is, but this is incredible. If anybody knows the artist, like, write it in the comment section. But when I see that warrior in the doorway, the big doorway, and the other warrior where that doorway is probably as big as this, but you know what I see? This war, like when two warriors fought, you know what it was? It was like two universes that could not permit each other to coexist. And so battle meant like the intensity of the lifetime. Do you know? There's a story I'll share and I'll end the episode. There was this servant during a certain time of the Japanese Empire. Where this servant of this household, so there was pretty much this imperial swordsman, and this imperial swordsman drinks coffee. No, I'm kidding. He doesn't drink coffee. Pretty much, there's this servant of this household of this imperial swordsman. That means the swords, like the teacher of the army of the empire, like the master swordsman of the empire. And so this master swordsman comes home with his like samurai armor and all this, and samurais carry two swords usually. And not usually, I think always, but like so this samurai, I mean, depends if you have two swords. But so this imperial swordsman comes home. He sees that he has been away from his household for such a long time that his wife and the servant are in the bed, and the wife couldn't hold herself anymore because there was a servant in the house, And so he comes home and he sees the servant there with his wife, and the first thing he says is, he says, "Get out." He tells the person to get out, and the wife is just silent in shame, just super quiet, And how the story goes forth is he tells the servant, "Step outside." Not a single word. He's not demonstrating anger. He's not being like he's not trying to he's not being violent. He tells the person to come outside, and he throws one of the swords, and it's like in the town, and everybody in the town is watching, because why not? It's like there weren't movies back then. So everybody's watching, and the swordsman has thrown this sword, and he just says one word to the servant. He says, "Fight." As if you have dishonored, you have dishonored one's, an imperial master swordsman's like kingdom, So the servant finds himself in that moment where he's looking at this sword, and it's past that moment where he's told himself he's fucked up, and he's looking at this master swordsman, and he suddenly gets the idea of his guru. He had in this kind of Zen story, this guy, the servant, has a guru, has like a teacher figure, right? And so, a notable teacher figure. And so what he says is that I'm a disciple of this guru, and I have to see my guru before I fight you, right? And there was a level of cultural code of honor, right? Where in the story, the guy's like, it's like okay, here, hold on. The servant says, "I gotta speak to my guru, this enlightened person." And the servant and the master swordsman has a respect for the disciples of that enlightened person. So he says, "Tomorrow you'll be here," something like that, Or he just walks up to him and says, "Tomorrow," And so this servant runs to his like Zen master teacher figure. And he runs to the Zen master teacher figure who's just sitting underneath a tree meditating. And he says, hey, he sits there quietly until the teacher's meditation is finished. The teacher opens his eyes as if already knowing what's going on. And he says, like, "What's up?" And so the servant says, "I messed up. Do you know, what should I do? Please, enlightened master, tell me to meditate by this tree till the end of time, And the Zen master says, hold on. And he hears the situation, like the person tells him, the servant tells the Zen master the situation. The Zen master sits down, closes his eyes, and like an antenna, a signal is received. He gets an answer. The disciple is waiting for this Zen master to tell him something, give him some sort of hope. The Zen master says, this is your destiny, this is your karma, you have to fight tomorrow. And the only thing I will tell you, this is the word of wisdom the Zen master gives to the servant who has to go fight to a sudden death scenario. He says, fight as if it's your last day in this existence. And this servant hears this sentence and he just becomes quiet and he sits down. It's as if like it's over. All the desires, all the joys, all the future expectations, it's as if it's over. Tomorrow it's like his last day in existence. And so the next day at the same time, the Imperial Swordsman is waiting there, the Master Swordsman, and he's thrown his sword already on the ground, and he sees the servant come to the square, and everybody's watching. And the servant, just for a moment, he has no martial art training, nothing. It's just, he just fathoms. Sorry guys, I'm getting a bit emotional. He just fathoms it's his last moment in this existence. And he just, in a frenzy, grabs the sword and just fights as if the Master Swordsman suddenly sees something in the servant's eyes that he's only seen in battles where there has been victory. He sees in the servant's eyes this endless, not endless, I would say he sees this kind of like, a sort of eternal conquering rage. And he sees in the eyes of the servant, this Master Swordsman, as they're fighting, and he's shocked that his servant could fight like this. But the servant is in such a chaotic state of mind because he thinks he's gonna die any moment, right? So he's going full out, all out, in that existential situation. And the Master Swordsman for a second sees the intensity in the glare of the servant's eyes is as if I will not lose. And that mentality makes the guy hold the sword a bit shaky, imagine. And the sword falls from the Master Swordsman's hands. And the servant is just panting, and there's just this sudden pause. This silence where the town people have become invisible. As if they don't want to interfere, not to even, as if they cannot even touch that moment those two warriors are in. So, we hear the sword fall, and the servant just stares at the Master Swordsman, and the Master Swordsman just nods. And in his nod, he's saying it's as if, okay, it's over. Whatever happened is over now. As if it's like the harmony, some sort of harmony has come to the moment. Now, how does the Zen story end? This is literally the ending of the Zen story I'm going to tell you. 3 days later, the servant attains enlightenment, attains nirvana. That's the moral of the story. Now you connect the dots, dear listener. Could it be that we should not have an absolute ideological system, but an absolute effort in our whole moment? Do you know? It's as if we are alive once to perform the greatest thing that the universe can consider intelligent. There is, I would say, no such thing as stupid people or smart people. Why? Because if the whole system fails, we're all stupid. We're all idiots. And if the whole system succeeds, we're all geniuses. That means the species figured it out, found a strategy to retaliate against the probabilities of extinction in the void. What greater opponent is there? There's an ancient saying, they say the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and mankind's greatest enemy is time. And it's not that time is an enemy, but time is ruthless. That means as if you tell me was Genghis Khan who was quoted to say, I'm the wrath of God, when he would, like a savage animal, conquer, you know. And then there is time as the greatest conqueror in the inner realms. How nature goes forth, you know. And it's not, I'm not trying to say time is something good or bad that we fight against or whatever, even though I was saying that enemy of my enemy. I'm just saying that when human beings realize trying to solve the problems of the collective unconscious make more sense than judging the individual consciousness. When we understand that, it's gonna literally be like, I've pretty much perceived that the halls of advanced communication on the planet will look like something where everybody is a pilot, and it's like a space station inside society, an inner space station, you know, poetically. So what I mean by that is a platform where the pilots come, and in some sense, through the advancement of how far the complex ideas, you know what it is? I'm that person who's saying, hey guys, stop the believing and disbelieving game, and let's create the most incredible archive of all the ways that human beings ever looked at the world. There's really nothing to teach. It's just the journey of eyes so far. So your redemption is your choice of if your attention wants to linger in the past, or it wants to salute the past as if it did its service and it's done. The past served, and it deserves to go, you know, to Elysium. That means send your past to your paradise. Send your past to heaven, and then live into the future to build paradise on earth, you know. And those who are fans of this project, Civilization 2.0 is like, I guess, I don't know, one of the first efforts towards this. I'm that person who's saying that if we don't build sky cities, we will be swallowed by extinction inevitably. The legend of the kingdoms in the clouds has returned. You know, it's the archaic revival of that. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I'll be on Discord for those interested and who have questions about this episode. Namaste. And just one more thing. What did I write? Oh yeah, the art of the lifetime. This is my personal approach, guys. Everything that we are considering of any value is contained through shape. So if somebody starts studying the design of reality, their approach to knowledge is way more faster than writing down notes on a blackboard of like what someone said in the past who isn't even alive to, you know, testify for what he said, you know. So the redemption of the forgotten, or the redemption of the forgotten ones, it means you have forgotten yourself, your greater self, which is humanity's win-win situation, you know. There is no greater calling. In the outer realms, the greatest calling, the greatest mission is to build. People can challenge me on this. I feel there is no greater idea than the advanced civilization. The advanced civilization is the greatest idea in the outer realms. The concept of advanced communication is the greatest dynamic state of the inner realms. That means a pilot needs to be able to move through various elevations, and rather people becoming emotional over how their past happened. It's kind of like you wonder about how to move in the vehicle, not like you don't identify with the vehicle, or anytime a car hits your car, you feel you get hurt. Do you know? Right, imagine like your nerves were connected to the car somehow, and if the car got hurt, you would feel the pain. Right, so like we are disconnected from the vehicle, right? So when it comes to that inner witness where creativity is in some sense what it allows on stage, it's as if the meaning of life is the finalization of the casting call of all the archetypes that compose the world where the self is being in. You know, I know there will come a time, I've predicted it 600 years and more, where there will be for the first time the statement ushered, the sky is our home. That means imagine we are not just creatures that lived on Earth, we also lived in the atmosphere. Like, how cool is that? And then we lived beyond the atmosphere, interstellar cities. How cool is that? Then we had AI endlessly going into the cosmos, building advanced civilizations everywhere, while the whole purpose of life becomes rendered as just to have sex all over the universe. Because right now, overpopulation, due to the absence of proper technology, like we don't have Sky City technology yet, so it's as if the species hasn't yet figured out that it can counter overpopulation through a three-dimensional perspective, right? That means the sky is endless. You know how many people can live in the sky? The sky is like endless real estate, you know, and the sky can't be owned. That's the most beautiful thing about it, right? I mean, of course nations have airfields. I mean, now we're living in a world where there is walls in the sky, but like but I will tell you, in reality, it's just this, there is no such thing as a sky. It's just this rock in the middle of nowhere, you know. It's all like, believe it or not, the cultural animal, the story of the personality, or how we have become, how human personality is developed, is not very rational, guys. You know, and this is the biggest challenge, that if we use a rational method, we're missing out on all the irrational variables or potentials or probabilities to something, right? So right now, like physicists and let's say scientists and philosophers, they're kind of like, they can't, you know, stay in the same room too long. But in the future, like literally there's going to be like King Arthur and Knight of the Round Table, but these are going to be like from every field, where there's going to be a sociologist, a psychologist, you know, someone even in the medical professional, a sort of round circle of the most important branches of knowledge and how they incorporate into some sort of personality, influence on personality in society, right? Because it's like, it's impossible to be a person if there is no character in the story, right? And the world is being our first story, but the inner realms are like how the world echoes in your greater perception. That means it's like when I say apple, you know, behind your eyes, you hear the word apple, like the sound enters your ear and the image of an apple maybe appears. Or you see the word apple maybe. Or maybe you just heard the sound and there was no image in your inner realms. Like, people are different. In order to build an advanced civilization, rather than honor the past, then the present, then the future, we should start by honoring the future, then the present, then the past. That means the species right now, it's like a dimension of our psychologies are not activated. This is the collective honor phase. I don't know if it's going to happen. Like, I don't know if it, like, I hope it starts, like, I think it's gonna, hopefully I'm aiming to kind of see if it's even possible for it to happen in 30 years. But pretty much, it's as if we're on a rock in the middle of nowhere and we should attempt the most advanced thing, both behind our eyes and in front of our eyes, and redemption is like future freedom. That means people who feel they're forgotten, or there's a sort of back-breaking guilt, or let's say an impure conscience, It's as if, what else can the human being do? Either we carry on in the archetype we have and the idea of the self we have, or we in some sense step out of that Iron Man suit and step into a new Iron Man suit in a world where the human being is more civilized than the violence of the animal, which has been a long-term thing. We have way more experience being savage animals than being civilized human beings who are talking, right? So that's a very rare advantage. Oh man. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening, and I'm gonna let this warrior and that other warrior in the picture kind of fight. So I think we gotta end our talk, guys. These two characters in the picture want to fight. Imagine one of them is the servant and one of them is the master swordsman. And one last thing, guys, to say, really the mind, the way we train, like we train our bodies by, like, let's say, for example, bodybuilding or repetitive muscle development, right? But in the inner realms, it's world shifting. Like world dash shifting, if I can create that verb. It's like the imagination is it's having the same result as a teleportation device would. Where people, when they remember the past, they're actually teleporting in their inner realms to the past. And as the Buddha says, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. The journey of an advanced civilization is the same. If every human being, in the background of their mind, they serve the collective vision, it doesn't mean you have to sacrifice yourself for the collective vision. What I'm saying, you serve it. That means somehow human beings live in ways where it's a win-win scenario, and rather than judgment causing war, the context became multidimensional before the concepts could fight. Multidimensionality and proper advanced communicators in society is literally the quickest route towards an advanced civilization. And not the quickest, but a quick route. The quickest route is self-realization, the concept of enlightenment, which in order to shield the wisdom traditions, I've considered as the concept of advanced communication. The ultimate advancement of communication is where light, image, and physical moment are the same. So inner image, inner world, and outer world are the same, as if they are all in one light beam of consciousness. That means it's as if the world is like the light of the sun outside, and the inner realm is the light of the sun inside. But the sun inside is the Parabrahman of the Atman, the collective soul of the individual soul. This is the distinction between the concept of a spirit and a soul. The soul is, in some sense, has a collective presence where we're like, wait a minute, if I have a soul, does the planet have a soul? Wait a minute. If the planet has a soul, does the solar system have a soul? Wait a minute. If the galaxy has a soul, does, if our galaxy has a soul, could the neighboring galaxy have a soul? And could their souls, in some sense, be in contact? Because you see, the mind can stretch into the unknown, and that's where geometry becomes really relevant in the inner realms. But through single-pointedness, that means you cultivate in certain moments of life single-pointedness of mind, and in certain moments of life, the person cultivates multidimensional dynamism, and the only way you can cultivate that is by trusting it. Without trust, there is no skill that can enter consciousness. So you could say the concept of trust for the religious person is seen as faith, For the secular person, it means if you don't trust anything in the world, you can't move. If the person doesn't believe their body, there is no mover to a body. You see what I mean? So I'm telling you, it's like more than people wanting to be spiritual and finding truth. Everybody's a different DNA. Everybody's a different instrument. Let the great orchestra begin. You know, the orchestra where the minds were like music. That means an advanced civilization would be like this incredibly beautiful music was being heard, and everybody started running towards the beautiful music, realizing they are part of the orchestra. Their actions suggest the future that will either remember us or don't, or won't have the opportunity to even remember us. We have to care for the natural human being in the dawn of a technological age. We have to care for the transcendental self-inquiry and methodology that the ancients used. Do you see? That means the coolest thing about wisdom traditions, you know, the mystical traditions like books like the Vedas, is that to me they were advanced communicators who managed to keep something from that time alive. Do you know, they had somehow created a sort of, they like, to me books are never like, you can never say a book is a source of complete knowledge. A book is just a giant photograph, you know. That means you read the book like a whole film, you experience it like a film, but the way you conclude the book at the end is like a giant photograph, you know. And the intelligence that engages images, like it has it, like, that means the type of imagination that is internally cinematic, and the type of intelligence that is, I call it like typeface or typewriter kind of like the person, like that means if somebody says Apple, you see the letter A-P-P-L-E just kind of appear, for example, you know, or you see it appear simultaneously. You know, everybody's neurons engages differently. Through a collective multidimensional piloting, the context of the world will adjust to trying to enhance the human experience. Certain dimensions of human experience, we have to move our world. Certain dimensions, we have no choice, the world moves. You know, sometimes for me, karma, you know what it is, like when I experience karma, like throughout the day, sometimes, you know what it is like? It's as if like something is passing me, like a giant bus is passing me and I'm standing on the sidewalk. That means a lot of karma doesn't need to be touched. That means I have this mentality that, you know, a bit kind of like the yogis, where they were like, in the outer realms, don't touch anything. What they meant is that live in life, but observe how desire can possess the person in imagery. So there has to be an attention beyond the image. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. This was a long episode. Namaste.